Hi everybody, I'm just some guy and today I'm going to review Darwin Cooke's DC The New Frontier. I've been waiting to do this one for a while. I love this series. Basically, imagine if someone gave the DC universe the Incredibles treatment. This maxi-series is Darwin Cooke's love letter to DC's pantheon of heroes. I'm not just talking about the superheroes, but the Golden Age classics like the Doom Patrol, the Suicide Squad, and the Losers. It's not so much as a throwback to a bygone era as it is a retelling of the DC universe with all these characters coexisting in one big universe, something that's rarely been done and definitely not the way Cooke handled it. I remember when this series came out in 2004. It got a lot of hype, but also a lot of backlash. Some people rejected the look of his art and the tone of his story. This was mostly because Darwin Cooke's style is heavily influenced by Kirby, Fleischer, and Bruce Timm. The last one makes sense. Cooke worked on Timm's animated projects. You may look at his work now and go, I don't see the problem. What you've got to remember is that this book dropped right at the beginning of the current postmodern era. People were all about photorealism and showing heroes as flawed people just like everyone else. When they saw Cooke's highly stylized, very simplified art style, they were like, where are all the buttons and zippers and seams? How come I can't see every wrinkle in the suit? It really pissed off some people, which was weird because these were the same folks who would sing the praises of Bruce Timm's animated series. That style is good enough for animation, but not for a comic? Then when these folks got to Cooke's story, they kind of lost it. Why? Because it wasn't trying to be a Watchmen clone. Oops, did I say that out loud? It's true though. So much of what you see today is people aping Watchmen without understanding what the story was. Watchmen worked because it deconstructed the mythos of superheroes, not just the heroes themselves. Most of what you see today is the latter. It's all about showing how the heroes can be as dirty and shady and ruined as everyone else. That's part of what Watchmen did, but it's missing the broader political and social context. Without that context, it amounts to simply tearing down the heroes for the sake of seeing them fail and fall, and at that point, can you really call them heroes? Darwin Cooke took a different approach. What if our heroes weren't allowed to be heroes? We've seen this before. Kingdom Come does this. The Incredibles, the best superhero film ever made, does this. Thankfully, Cooke's story is more like the latter one. He gives us a post-World War II world where the Golden Age heroes have been made to register with the US government or retire. Superman and Wonder Woman still operate, working for the government. Batman works in the shadows, as always. The Justice Society retires, and in their place we see the creation of groups like the Suicide Squad working for the government. The world Cooke builds is based on a hyper-real version of the 1940s to the 1960s. He doesn't dodge touchy social issues like race, but he approaches them from the point of reconstructing the hero instead of tearing them down. The New Frontier isn't about showing how the heroes are like us. It's about showing what it means to be a hero and why these people in particular become heroes. It's a joyous look at heroes, even in its dark moments, which is something missing from so many books today. You want to learn more about these people, what drives them, whether they will face their fears or rise up to fight the good fight despite the government blocking them. This is where Cooke's brilliance as a storyteller really comes in. By combining all of DC's Golden and Silver Age characters into one big story, we get to see how these characters influence each other. Our story begins with a tale about the Losers in 1945, just at the tail end of World War II. They're on a mysterious island full of dinosaurs. We're immediately grounded into the reality of war and the savagery of the world. This book isn't bloody or gory by any means, but it doesn't shy away from heavy issues like death, sacrifice, or violence. After this intro, we get the explanation for what's happened in the world. Cooke adds in a little bit of extra lore so World War II unfolds as it did in our world. Basically, the problem is, if heroes existed, how does Germany survive as long as it does? Cooke's answer is the Spear of Destiny. This holy relic allows the Fuhrer to keep the heroes out of the war. After the end of the war, the US government brands heroes outlaws and un-American, using McCarthy-like tactics to tarnish them. Most of the heroes retire rather than reveal their identities. Some like Batman and Hourman keep fighting while others like Wonder Woman and Superman work for the government. This sets up the world of the New Frontier, one in which the heroes are largely gone. Cooke does these time jumps in the story, mostly set around the debuts of certain characters, like Hal Jordan and Barry Allen. I really enjoyed how Cooke reshaped some of their mythos. Hal is shown as a pilot in the Korean War, willing to go on any dangerous mission but unwilling to kill anyone. So you know what has to happen. We get this wonderfully presented moment where Hal has to fight off a Korean soldier who doesn't know that the war is over. He tries to tell the guy that the war ended, but he can't think of the words in Korean and ends up killing the man in self-defense. While he's on the helicopter with Lois and Jimmy, because all the characters interact like this, he finally remembers the words. That one act of killing sets Hal on a path of self-punishment. He takes the riskiest assignments and jobs he can, essentially hoping to die doing them. But such is his luck and skill that he survives. I love the way Cook handles this because it's not presented as an attack on Hal's character. It's just the opposite. It shows a man forced to do something he didn't want to do and having to do it for all the right reasons, but still feeling guilty for it. When he eventually becomes Green Lantern, Abin Sur tells Hal that he's a man with courage, a man without fear. Hal is like me, I've been branded a coward, and Abin Sur says to him that courage can take many forms. Quote, there is the courage of conviction, to stand for what you believe in despite the personal cost, the courage to avoid partisan thinking, and value the existence of all, the courage to act decisively when survival is at stake. That's not just what it means to be a Green Lantern. That is what it means to be a hero. We see this echoed with Martian Manhunter. He poses as a police officer because TV shows show that cops are the good guys, and John wants to be good. He understands that people wouldn't react well to him because unlike Superman, he can't pass as human. But everything that John does is built around doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do. We get the same thing with Barry Allen. Here's a man who chooses to act as a masked hero despite the federal prohibitions, and does it simply because it's the right thing to do. The first part of the story is about building these three heroes in particular, which I love because, at least at the time, these were all second and third tier heroes. It's easy to focus on Batman, Wonder Woman, and Superman, and they've all got their parts, which I won't spoil, but it's nice to see the other heroes get some love. The story picks up when John, who operates in Gotham, uses his telepathy to track down a kidnapped child. He and his partner go to this church and walk in on Batman, destroying everybody in sight. John gets taken out when a fire starts and spreads around him. His fear of fire keeps him from acting. Batman moves in on the leader of the group, and I'll just read the caption from the book. Quote, it's the sound of the wrist breaking that finally does it. The remaining freaks run blubbering into the shadows. That's my Batman, breaking people's wrists since 1956. We get this other great moment with Batman and John when Bats shows up at John's place. John took the cult leader's book, but it was locked and he couldn't open it. Batman took the medallion the guy had and later figures out it's the key. So he shows up at John's place and basically says he knows everything about John and gives him the medallion. And then he says this line, only Batman could deliver, and I'm not even good enough to do it. I'll let Jeremy Sisto handle it.
I have a $70,000 sliver of radioactive meteor to stop the one from Metropolis. With you, all I need is a penny for a book of matches.
That's my Batman. At this point, the story really picks up. We get introduced to this government guy named Faraday, who is sort of like the smoking man from X-Files, but way douchier. He's working with the Ferris Company along with Hal Jordan, who's shacking up with Carol Ferris. Faraday knows about Martian Manhunter but can't find him. He takes John accidentally killing Dr. Airedale as intentional and assumes that Martians are headed to Earth for an attack. The Ferris Company is basically acting as a cover for the military to begin an attack on Mars. John finds out about the test and tries to hop onto the ship. Faraday catches him in the act as the ship is lifting off. John can survive it, but Faraday can't, so John chooses to save Faraday's life instead of going home. Later, complications with the ship eventually cause an explosion that ends up downing Abin Sur. It's because the explosion is yellow, setting off Hal Jordan becoming the Green Lantern. Eventually, people begin to piece together the crazy monsters on the island way back at the beginning of the story and the cult leader's book and realize an attack is coming, but not from Mars, but from somewhere else. This is what brings all the heroes together. I'm going to leave it there because I don't want to give away the climax of the story, but I do want to touch on one more element of the story, and that's the Southern vigilante known as John Henry. I mentioned before that Cook doesn't shy away from social issues, and this subplot is definitely one of them. John Wilson becomes a vigilante John Henry, based on the folktale character Iron John, to take revenge on the Ku Klux Klan members who burned his wife and daughter to death and left him hanging on a tree to watch them burn. This happened in 1957 Knoxville, so it fits with the time frame of the story. It's a subplot that really doesn't fit into the broader story other than to show that the nostalgic 1950s weren't so great for everyone. It's not heavy-handed though. Cook is too good of a writer to browbeat the reader with the message. Instead, what he does is pop in these vignettes showing John Wilson becoming John Henry. It ends with him getting shot by the Klan and escaping only to bump into a little white girl. He asks her for help, and she yells to the Klan to tell them, "The nigger's over here." Then we get this broadcast recounting what happened to John Wilson, and it's not pretty. It almost seemed like the entire storyline was wasted, but it's really about this one point. Martian Manhunter is shocked by what happened, and the guy with him says, quote, "That John Henry is one hell of a man, and I figure he had to know the price of the stand he took. This is America, not some sugar-coated utopia." Right there, Cook shuts down any nostalgic 1950s criticism that might have been lobbed his way, especially with his mostly white, mostly male cast. He's not opining for the so-called good old days. He's showing you how and why heroes were born. They come out of the nastiest part of the world to show us that we can be something better. That's what DC The New Frontier represents, and it's something lacking in today's superhero books. Cook revels in his love of heroes, but he also shows us the grit and grime it took to make them heroes. They do the right thing even in a world that sucks. They don't succumb to it, and they don't reflect it. Our heroes aren't going around with the sides of their head shaved bashing in people's heads with baseball bats because my identity. They may use violence, but always with a purpose to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Even Batman isn't going to just break someone's wrist just because. That's not who he is. In fact, in the story, he changes his mask because it frightened the kid he was trying to rescue. He wants to scare criminals, not children. That's what heroes are about. They're not real. Few people are as altruistic as any of these characters. The point is that they are supposed to show us the best humanity has to offer, and what we could become if we wanted to. I'll end with this piece from Darwin Cook. The world will always have dark corners, and black and white comes in thousands of shades of gray. But here are 7 people, good and true, come what may. They have the power to enslave the world, but work tirelessly to keep it free. They don't succumb to envy, greed, or jealousy, and their sense of purpose is driven by an unshakable faith in mankind's basic good. They are, in the best sense of the word, childlike. It is the very essence of the term superhero, an imaginative fiction that is better than real, constructed to help you in some small way to develop your own youthful imagination and value system. I'm 42 now, and I suppose that I believe that the magic of this specific genre is based on the notion that 7 powerful people can work together to make the world a better place. That they will do the right thing no matter what the personal cost, no matter how grim and gritty the world around them becomes. They are the heroic ideal. That is the spirit driving the characters in The New Frontier. Like my beloved Scope View, I suppose only a child could buy into such a ridiculous premise. But once it's in your heart, you can't help but take that little scrap of magic forward with you. Thank you, Darwin Cook, for showing us what heroes are meant to be.